In August 2024, gold crossed $2,500 an ounce for the first time in history. By October 2025, it broke $3,000. The dollar's share of global reserves has quietly slid from 72% in the year 2000 to roughly 58% by 2024, the lowest level in nearly 3 decades. Central banks aren't buying treasuries like they used to. They're buying metal. That's not the first time a reserve system has cracked, and we already know how the story ends. History doesn't repeat. It patterns. This one is called the reserve currency interregnum. It's the chaotic gap between when one monetary order dies and the next one is born. Most people think the gold standard is ancient. It isn't. The classical gold standard, the one every economist references, only ran from roughly 1870 to 1914. 44 years. Before that, the world ran on bimetallism, silver and gold together, constantly fighting for dominance. In the 1870s, that fight broke the system. Germany had just won the Franco-Prussian War. In 1871, Berlin took the French indemnity, 5 billion gold francs, and used it to dump silver and adopt a pure gold mark. The United States followed in 1873 with the Coinage Act, which demonetized silver almost overnight. Silver miners in Nevada called it the crime of '73. Farmers in the American Midwest, drowning in debt, called it ruin. Prices collapsed. The Long Depression began the same year. The world didn't transition cleanly from silver to gold. It spent 30 years at war over which metal ruled. Populist William Jennings Bryan built an entire presidential campaign around one sentence in 1896. "You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." He lost. Gold won. But the fight took a generation. The same thing happened 40 years later, on a bigger scale. In 1914, World War I broke out, and every major combatant suspended gold convertibility within weeks. Britain, the anchor of the classical system, never fully recovered. The pound had been the world's reserve currency for nearly a century. By 1925, Churchill tried to put Britain back on gold at the pre-war rate. It was a disaster. Unemployment spiked. The general strike of 1926 paralyzed the country. In 1931, Britain abandoned gold for good. But the dollar wasn't ready to take over yet. So the world entered a 17-year interregnum, a no-man's land of competitive devaluations, trade wars, and the Smoot-Hawley tariff of 1930. Global trade collapsed by roughly 65% between 1929 and 1934. The Great Depression wasn't just a banking crisis, it was a monetary vacuum. The new order didn't arrive until July 1944. In a resort hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, 730 delegates from 44 nations spent 3 weeks redesigning global money. The deal was elegant on paper. The US dollar would be pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. Every other currency would peg to the dollar. America, holding roughly 2/3 of the world's monetary gold in 1944, would be the anchor. It worked for about 25 years. By 1950, the United States held 20,000 tons of gold in vaults at Fort Knox and under the New York Fed. By 1971, that number had collapsed to roughly 8,000 tons. France under Charles de Gaulle had been aggressively redeeming dollars for gold since the mid-1960s, literally sending warships to New York to collect the bullion. De Gaulle's finance minister called the dollar's privileged position exorbitant. He wasn't wrong. On August 15, 1971, Richard Nixon went on national television on a Sunday night, preempting the popular Western bonanza, and announced that the United States would temporarily suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold. The suspension was never lifted. That moment, the Nixon shock, killed the gold-backed dollar. But nobody replaced it with anything. The system just kept running on momentum, and that's where it gets uncomfortable. Here's why this pattern keeps happening. Every reserve currency system is built on 2 things: trust and trade flow. Trust that the anchor won't be debased. Trade flow that creates constant demand for the anchor. When either one breaks, the system doesn't collapse immediately. It limps. Think of it like a dam with a hairline crack. Water doesn't rush out. It seeps. The structure looks fine from the outside for years, sometimes decades, while pressure builds behind it. In 1974, the United States patched the post-gold dam with something improvised. Treasury Secretary William Simon flew to Riyadh and cut a deal with the Saudis. Oil would be priced exclusively in dollars. In exchange, the United States would guarantee Saudi security and recycle petrodollars back through U.S. Treasury bonds. The rest of OPEC fell in line by 1975. This wasn't a designed monetary system, it was a Cold War accident. But it created something powerful, structural, non-negotiable global demand for dollars. Every country that needed oil needed dollars. Every dollar earned flowed back into U.S. debt markets. The deepest, most liquid bond market in history was born not from economic superiority, but from a handshake in the desert. The mechanism is simple. A reserve currency requires a sink, somewhere for the world's surplus savings to go. Britain had London's capital markets in the 19th century. America had the Treasury market after 1974. Without a sink, no currency can hold reserve status, no matter how powerful its issuer. When the sink gets politically risky, when holding the currency becomes a strategic vulnerability rather than a safe haven, the pattern begins. Countries hedge, they diversify, they build alternatives slowly because they can't afford a fast exit. The old system keeps running on inertia, while the replacement is assembled piece by piece in the background. This is the interregnum. It's never brief. It's never clean. And it almost always ends in a geopolitical rupture that forces the new order into existence. The cracks started showing around 2014. That year, Russia and China signed a $400 billion gas deal with significant portions settled outside the dollar. The same year, the BRICS bloc launched the New Development Bank, an explicit alternative to the IMF and World Bank. Most observers dismissed it. They shouldn't have. Then came February 2022. After Russia invaded Ukraine, the United States and its allies froze roughly $300 billion in Russian central bank reserves. For every finance minister outside the Western Bloc, that was the moment the dollar stopped being a neutral settlement asset. It became a weapon. You cannot unring that bell. Since then, the acceleration has been measurable. As of early 2026, reports suggest China has settled a growing share of its oil imports in yuan, with Saudi Arabia accepting renminbi for at least some portion of its crude sales. India is paying for Russian oil in rupees and dirhams. Iran trades with both in local currencies. The UAE joined BRICS in January 2024, along with Egypt, Ethiopia, and Iran. Saudi Arabia was invited and has participated in BRICS meetings without formally joining. Meanwhile, central banks have been buying gold at the fastest pace since the 1960s. According to the World Gold Council, central bank purchases exceeded 1,000 tons in both 2022 and 2023 and remained elevated through 2024 and 2025. China, Turkey, India, Poland, and Singapore have been the most aggressive buyers. The dollar's share of global reserves, tracked by the IMF, has fallen to around 58%, down from 72% in 2000. The U.S. national debt passed $34 trillion in early 2024 and has continued climbing. Interest payments now exceed the defense budget. Foreign holdings of U.S. treasuries as a share of total issuance have been declining, with domestic buyers and the Federal Reserve absorbing more of each auction. None of this means the dollar collapses tomorrow. Reserve currencies die slowly. The pound remained roughly 40% of global reserves in 1960, decades after it had functionally lost the top spot. What's unfolding looks less like a coup and more like erosion. Gold is returning as a neutral settlement layer. Bilateral trade in local currencies is expanding. Digital central bank currencies, China's ECNY, the European digital euro pilots, are being tested precisely for cross-border settlement that bypasses dollar rails. The replacement isn't named yet, but the ingredients are being assembled in real time. Can the pattern be broken? Can a reserve currency reinvent itself without collapse? Once. Maybe. Britain managed a relatively orderly handoff to the dollar between 1925 and 1945, but only because 2 world wars exhausted the British Empire and left the United States as the only major economy still standing. The transition wasn't negotiated. It was forced by catastrophe. The United States has one structural advantage no previous reserve issuer had: the depth of its capital markets, the rule of law in its courts, and a military that still projects power globally. These aren't small things. They're the reason the dollar has kept its status despite 20 years of warning signs. But the honest answer is this: no reserve currency in history has preserved its dominance by printing more of itself while alienating the countries holding its debt. The Dutch guilder didn't. The Spanish silver real didn't. The pound didn't. The pattern says transitions take between 15 and 30 years. The clock likely started in 2014. That puts the end state somewhere between 2029 and 2044. Pattern confirmed. Every reserve currency dies the same way, slowly, then all at once in the gap between the old order and the new one. Now I want your take. Do you think this same pattern is unfolding today, or is this time truly different? Tell me your perspective in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.